Recently, a Jewish friend related a conversation which took place with his young daughter regarding Christmas. "Daddy," she said, "I can understand why we don't have a Christmas tree or exchange presents. I know that Christmas is not part of our religion. But can't we at least decorate our house with colored lights?" You know, so many of our traditions at Christmas are not only rooted in our past, but are part of the cultural patterns of other lands and other peoples. How do you answer a question such as that? And what about the public school dilemma of Christian holidays and observances? Have we answered all the questions there? How far can we go in the separation of church and state without finding ourselves in the somewhat medieval position of arguing about how many angels can stand on the point of a pin? The subject, Christmas and the non-Christian child. The program is Challenge. For the next half hour, a rabbi, a minister, and a priest offer their combined counsel to many of the challenges we face in this day and in this time. Tonight, they discuss Christmas in the schools for the non-Christian child. Now, may I present the challenge panel. First, Rabbi Raphael Levine, Senior Rabbi of the Temple de Hirsch. Next, Dr. Lynn Corson, Senior Minister at the University Methodist Temple. And the moderator for this evening, Father William Tracy, the Administrator for St. Patrick's Church.
Thank you, Don, very much. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. In a recent editorial in one of our national magazines, Ave Maria, on January 1st, 1966, there was a very fine editorial on a subject which we are going to discuss tonight: the plight of the Jewish and non-Christian child at Christmas, particularly in the public school, but in our society in general. Many public schools, it says, in this country do not take into account the children of minority faiths in their planning of Christmas observances. This problem is better discussed after Christmas to ensure a more rational atmosphere. That is why we're doing it now during the month of February. According to a report recently issued by the American Jewish Congress and written by the head of the Council's Commission on Law and Social Practice, quote, "Religion in public schools, no matter how dressed up or watered down, serves only to harass, hurt, and dislocate children of minority faiths and to impair wholesome classroom relationships," end of quote, from the American Jewish Congress. After Bible reading and prayer, no other occasion provides so many difficulties for those concerned about, quote, "the establishment of religion in public schools than Christmas." The Christmas season has become pervasive in the United States, and not merely in its commercial aspects: the singing of carols, the decorating of our homes and streets, the tree at the White House, the giving of gifts. Christmas is everywhere. Christmas is deep in our culture in other more significant ways. Our literature, drama, music, and art, in significant proportion, is related to the Christmas theme. Our environment and that of our children is heavy with Christmas, and no school can ignore this environment without violating the principle of learning. But what of the child, the editorial asks, of minority faith at Christmas time? That is the subject of our discussion tonight, and I think we should start by asking Rabbi Levine to speak on this.
Father Tracy, I was very much impressed with your introduction. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was fair. I thought it was deeply sensitive to this problem. And it's not an easy one to discuss, as you know. And I don't think that we could have discussed this problem on our challenge program if this program had not developed as it has over the last 6 years. I think one of the great things that has grown out of the ecumenical movement has been this expression of sensitivity and charity toward other people different from our own. And that's why we're able to discuss this. You're absolutely right, Father. The Christmas season has always been a time of difficulty. I know for our children. And I'm sure if we had a Buddhist minister or priest here, he would say the same thing. As a matter of fact, I read an article written by someone in Honolulu, where about 40% or 30% or 40% of the people are Buddhists. And yet Christmas is celebrated there just like it is here. And it has created problems in there. They are a minority there. So when I speak, I'm not speaking for myself as a Jew only and for our Jewish children. And that's why I was very glad when you spoke of Jewish and non-Christian children, because they have the same problem we have, only maybe ours a little aggravated. And in the public schools is the main problem, because in the environment, we cannot possibly escape it, and I don't think we would want to escape it. I think it's a wonderful season of the year, with gift-giving, with goodwill, with everybody saying to everybody else a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and family reunions and all that. It's a wonderful season of goodwill. And I'm hoping that someday it may be the kind of season of goodwill in which, in the spirit of goodwill, we can enter into it without feeling that we are outsiders and, in a sense, being harassed. And I have some ideas, but maybe as we go on.
All right, Dr. Carson.
I have a kind of an ambivalence of mind as I come to discuss a subject like this. You can't escape your heritage and background. You can't escape your presuppositions upon which your judgments finally are based. And I'm not trying to escape them, and this is the cause of my ambivalence. I do recognize that in a pluralistic culture, respect has to be given to all groups in that culture. And the old Protestant hegemony, which was part of the culture of our country, has given way to a pluralism. And this needs to be recognized, and it's hard for those of us within this Protestant tradition to recognize this. And I'm part of the Protestant tradition, so I have my problems at this point. However, I do recognize that within the school situation, as a public institution supported by the taxes of all the people, there is a point at which the criticism is a valid criticism, that there should not be the recognition of distinctively religious observances peculiar to a particular faith. But on the other side of my mind, and speaking from my heart, I do also recognize that a part of the cultural heritage of this democracy is this same Christian faith. And we cannot divorce ourselves from the influence of this cultural heritage. And to expose children to the truth which is implicit in this cultural heritage concerning the founder of the Christian faith is to expose them to a fact in history, which in my judgment is a valid use of the Christmas season. So you see, I have difficulties in accommodating myself to the thought that minority groups religiously should force the issue and compel us to eliminate a situation which, in my judgment, is a contributing factor to the very principle of goodwill that you're suggesting.
Well, now, Rabbi, I'd like to come in here as moderator.
Yeah.
We cannot, this is the core of the problem, sidestep the point raised by Dr. Corson.
I know, and I was going to make a comment on that, and I say that I'm grateful for the complete honesty which Dr. Corson has expressed in his remarks, realizing that there is the ambivalence on his part. I understand that. Now go ahead.
Well, now, as a Christian, of course, I share with him the significance of Christmas. But to try and reach this accommodation in regard to the non-Christian child in our schools, I'd like to come back to this editorial in the National Magazine and follow through on his point. It says, here's an opportunity for Christians to implement the decree of the Vatican Council on ecumenical relations, because that decree pointed out that every effort to avoid expressions, judgments, and actions which do not represent with truth and fairness the beliefs of those separated from us should be avoided. Now, according to the interpretation of the Supreme Court, devotional religion, or quote, establishment, does not have a place in the public schools or in pluralistic society, and this is something which I accept and which I'm sure Dr. Corson accepts. Now, here is the problem, I think, as the editorial points out. Whether the Christmas observances in the public schools are in fact devotional and amount to, quote, establishment of religion, and whether they impair the rights of the non-Christian child is another matter. Many of our carols and other observances have become secularized by use and have become part of our common, quote, folk religion. When they are found to be objectionable, they should be transformed. But certainly the public school cannot ignore the rich cultural heritage to be found in religion with our common Hebrew Judeo roots, except to its own impoverishment. Now, would you like to comment on it from that viewpoint?
Yes, I would. And I can see that this is going to be, if I may say so, a wonderful, wonderful discussion, because it is on a very high level. It's on a level of a deep desire for understanding. I would agree with everything that you gentlemen said about Christmas being part of our American culture. If it were not that, if it were merely a legal question, I'm convinced, and I'm not a jurist and not a lawyer, but the way the Supreme Court has interpreted the separation of church and state, I think that if actually it came to a Supreme Court decision about Christmas in the public schools, the way it is celebrated with nativity scenes, with Christmas carols which are of Christological nature, I don't mean jingle bells, I mean Holy Night and Silent Night and Come All You Faithful and all that, the kind of carols that are sung, I think that the Supreme Court would have to decide that this is religious devotion and not merely folk religion. But I say this is a legal problem, and I'm not interested in entering into the legal aspects of it. I'm interested in the bigger thing that is developing in our relationships. The spirit of love and generosity and sensitivity. Now, if certain practices in the public schools, I'm not saying anything about the culture. I'm not saying anything about what you can do in the homes, what you can do in the streets, and things like that.
I'm
talking about the public schools.
Exactly. Well, this is where the problem rests. Right
now, I would suggest that having nativity scenes during the Christmas celebration in the public schools, having Christmas carols that are essentially religious in their content, like Come All You Faithful, Christ the Lord, which is natural for a Christian, but for a Jewish child. Now, for example, let me tell you an actual case that happened. One sensitive little youngster, 8 years old, came home and told his mother that he was, that he was in class and they were singing these Christmas carols. And they were singing this song, Come All You Faithful. And he said, I love the tune, but he says, I could not say, Christ the Lord. So what I did was merely to hum. But it was an embarrassment to him.
Yes, I can see that very definitely, Rabbi.
There is a movement here which I cannot help deploring personally. The elimination from the educational process on a public level of valid religious tradition and the connotations resulting from this, as the result of the protest of minority groups within the culture. Now, the Supreme Court decision which you referred to, which outlawed prayer in the public school, has occasioned a very great debate and protest. And congressional action has been threatened as the result of this. Which is to say that there can be a good case made for a religious emphasis in the public school system, which could be interpreted as non-sectarian, but nevertheless religious. In the same sense, I have a kind of inward protest at the attempt to eliminate from public education the dramatization of an historical event. Now, public schools dramatize all kinds of historical events. The birthdays of our founding fathers, the Thanksgiving season, all of this is dramatized. Well, for the world, there is a matter of historicity concerning the birth of Christ, whose influence cannot be gainsaid in our culture. And why it is not just as legitimate to dramatize the historical event of the birth of Christ as it would be to dramatize the historical event of the birth of George Washington is something which I cannot get around.
Okay, Rabbi.
I think I better answer
You better
that.
answer that.
Although, would you like to answer it?
No,
Coming from you, it would be better.
No, I think if you perhaps if you keep this thought in mind in answering it, the Supreme Court decision to which Dr. Corson referred, of course, banned prayer in the public schools.
I
But
will keep it in mind. I will, yes,
it did not ban teaching about religion.
Yeah.
Now, could what Dr. Corson said
Yes,
come under that heading?
yes, yes. You know, Dr. Corson, I could be more ready to accept non-sectarian prayer in the public schools. You know, the simple, you know, like God help my mother and my father and
Yes.
help our country and all that sort of thing. I could more readily accept that as a comparatively minor invasion of the rights of minorities and the separation of church and state than I could Christmas. And I'll tell you why. Because you cannot make Christmas non-sectarian. It's impossible. If you have these carols that are essentially Christological, they represent one particular faith in this country, and that I include Catholics and Protestants, the Christian faith. Now, it's true that they are the largest number of people, but the very essence of freedom and the democratic way of life, making every American an equal citizen in the sight of the law, and the public schools are representatives of the state. Everybody pays to their support. That in such a situation, the rights of the minority in matters of conscience, and this is a very important matter of conscience, cannot be violated. Legally, it cannot be violated, of course, but even spiritually. And I think, Dr. Corson, in one sense, I think you've been a little self-contradictory in your ambivalence, and I can understand that. I can understand your position, Dr. Corson. But I think that this is one situation where you have to rise above your conditioned responses.
Dr. Corson, the floor is yours.
My conditioned responses are speaking. One of the problems which always bothers me at this point is the problem of trying to accommodate myself to the thought that the minority can assume the prerogative of dictating to the majority. Now, you see, what you are saying is that because a minority disagrees with this, therefore it should be eliminated.
From the public schools.
Certainly from the public schools. But doesn't also the minority have some obligation in the democratic society to the will of the majority?
Yes.
Isn't there some responsibility to respect the majority? Now, why should we always be obligated to accommodate the will of the minority?
Well, let's hold it there now.
May I answer that?
Yes.
Because this is
Yeah.
important.
Yes.
Oh, this is fundamental. Let me tell you what they do in Israel. Now, Israel is a country where probably 95% of the people, maybe 98% of the people, are of the Jewish faith. But they don't have public schools. The Muslims have their own schools, supported by the state, mind you. The Christians have their own schools, supported by the state. And the Jews have their own schools, supported by the state. Therefore, they have a system whereby minority rights are protected. The only answer to your problem would be to abolish the public schools and to have Jews have their own parochial schools, Catholics have their own schools, and the various denominations of Protestantism have their own schools. But as long, and let the government pay for all of them. I don't object to that. Let the government pay for all of them. But when you have a public school which is supported by all the taxpayers and which has all kinds of people, minorities and majorities, your argument does not hold. Because if what you say is true, if I follow it logically, then the respect for the majority opinion would ultimately lead, and it would have to lead, to all of us becoming Christians.
Oh,
in its logical outcome.
I wouldn't say that the public school has this kind of definitive result in terms of conversion.
But it's the opening wedge.
The public school
It's
is
the
only
opening
just
wedge.
one small influence in the life of a child. And again, the right of conscience is upheld. I wouldn't certainly agree to the principle of the elimination of the public school. This is one of the...
No, I'm merely suggesting this is a hypothetical situation.
This is one of the
course.
basic structures of our democracy, and from my judgment, is necessary in this democracy. It is one of the leavening influences that bind us together. But I am saying, and I still, again, speaking from my conditioning, I am saying that as far as I can see, that minorities have a responsibility in the same sense in which majorities have a responsibility. And minorities must not assume that always their will be heard.
Or may I say,
That's fine. Keep this in mind, Rabbi.
Yes.
Well, maybe it's an unfair parallel, but in a democratic state,
yeah,
the minority, say in an election and so on, accepts the rule of the majority.
yes. But our founding fathers were very wise when they put in the First Amendment to the Constitution. They probably were far visioned enough to realize that ultimately this would not be a Christian country, that this would be a country of all kinds of people coming here for 1,000 different reasons. It so happened that the first people who came here came to run away from religious persecution or for other reasons, and they happened to be Christians. But then Jews came who ran away from religious persecutions and other reasons. Negroes were brought here from Africa against their will, and they were indoctrinated in the Christian tradition. Buddhists came over here. Muslims came over here. A lot of people who have no religion, who don't believe in any of the organized religions. And incidentally, I'm reminded of the secular city. He has a lot to say about this very point by saying that the kind of recognition and respect for each other, majorities and minorities and human beings in relation to each other.
This is precisely is what I'm saying. That there needs to be this kind of respect.
But
respect
not in the public schools.
Oh, why not in the public school? Across the board respect. Respect that minorities have for the rights of majorities.
But you
There's
don't.
the respect that majorities have for the rights of minorities.
But do you, let me ask you this.
Father Tracy, you've been strangely silent
Yeah,
here.
I'm enjoying this tonight, sitting back here, enjoying the prerogatives of a moderator.
I mean, really.
Go ahead.
Father, we love you for your charity and for your giving us this opportunity, because I think I disagree with Dr. Corson much more than I disagree with you on this point. But
You haven't heard him on this point.
Well, I know him. But what I'm trying to say is this, Dr. Corson, that I almost forgot what I was going to say.
About the rights of the minority versus the majority.
Yes. You see, when the majority is in control of the school system, and let's say the majority is a fundamentalist Protestant group, and there are such in the Midwest, in certain cities and certain communities, and they make the school, religion in the school, not merely the simple thing of a prayer, non-sectarian prayer, but they actually teach the Bible and the New Testament only. And they make compulsory chapel and all that kind of thing. How about the non-fundamentalists? How about the Catholics in that group? How about the liberal Protestants? How about Buddhists or Jews or atheists or atheists? I don't mean atheists. I mean people who are not members of an organized religion and yet who in their hearts are very deeply religious. But they don't like the organized terminology. Words again. Words.
I wouldn't for a moment discount the problem. You aren't suspecting that I discount the problem. I know the problem is a real one, particularly for minorities group, particularly for you as the rabbi of the synagogue.
But where's your charity?
I would throw it back to you. Where is your charity? You see, and this is precisely the
my
problem.
charity. I'm not saying abolish Christmas from the schools.
But how can you abolish
There is
Christmas without the Christological content?
Oh, you can have the wonderful spirit of goodwill and friendship and brotherhood and all those
But
things.
this must be grounded. This must be grounded in something besides Santa Claus.
In love.
But where does love proceed from?
From God.
From the Christian standpoint, you say.
Only from the Christian standpoint? You mean Jews don't understand love? Muslims don't understand love?
No, you misunderstand me.
Well, I think, gentlemen, it's time for me to come out of the ghetto here and get into this discussion. But since I had the opening remarks and the closing remarks, I thought it was better to have this fine discussion here tonight between my two colleagues. And I think it was very interesting, and I hope it helped to throw some light on this very sensitive area in human relationships for you. And I'd like to conclude with these remarks, which I believe summarize our relationships tonight in the discussion as I see it. It makes eminent good sense for Christians to explore this concept of teaching about religion in regard to non-Christians. On October 28, 1965, the Vatican Council published one of its decrees drawing up new guidelines for Catholics in their relationship with non-Christians. And I think part of the problem, as I see it tonight, between Rabbi Levine and Dr. Corson, is the problem how to teach about religion rather than to be teaching religion itself in a public school. And one thing I can do to help clarify the issue for you tonight is to tell you about a book that is coming out of the press this month entitled God in Education, A New Opportunity for American Schools by Niels Nelson of Rice University, a book which I recommend to all of you who are interested in this subject to read. In the meantime, our sensitivity to the confusion of the non-Christian child and our sensitivity to the non-Christian's religious beliefs should be attuned to positive action, and not just during the Christmas season. When we Christians talk to Jewish children, to Buddhists and other non-Christian children, as teachers or as neighbors, we must not speak of we and our ways as opposed to their ways, lest we identify the school and government and society and put them on the outside position. The non-Christian is not a guest in a public school or a second-class citizen in America. He has a right to feel with all of us that he is equally an American. Thank you very much. And now back to our announcer, Don McCune.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next week at the same time, these three leaders of our major faiths will return to share their knowledge and to offer their help as you face your individual challenge. The many questions which arise in the course of your daily lives can be answered during these discussions. Simply address your letters to Challenge, KOMO-TV, Seattle, Washington. Challenge is produced by Marty Camp, directed by Ken Ritchie. Join us next week at the same time when Dr. Corson, Rabbi Levine, and Father Tracy again explore the challenges Americans face today.